Hello and welcome to Fight News Now Extra. My name is John Pollock, and we have all of the latest news coming out of the weekend with the UFC's return to Brazil. Frank Mir returns to the win column, and the UFC will return to Mexico later this year with a heavyweight title fight. All of today's headlines, plus John Ramdeen and Robin Black are here to break it all down. Frank Mir had his arm raised for the first time since 2011 after stopping Antonio Silva in the opening round of their Fight Night main event on Sunday evening in Brazil. Mir caught him with a beautiful left hook and finished him with strikes and elbows on top, and needing only 1:40 to do so. The win ends a 4-fight losing drought for Mir, and now Silva is winless in his last 4 outings. Lightweight Michael Johnson looked sensational over the course of 3 rounds, earning a unanimous decision over Edson Barboza. Johnson controlled the pace and tempo from the start, using crisp combinations, movement throughout the fight, and would mix in some leg kicks towards the end of the round as he put forward the best performance of his career. Johnson called out Benson Henderson during his post-fight interview as well. A flyweight bout has been added to the big UFC 187 card on May the 23rd in Las Vegas as former title challenger John Dodson makes his return after a major knee injury to meet Zach Makovsky on the card. Dodson last fought in June of last year, having won 2 straight since unsuccessfully facing Demetrius Johnson in January of 2013. Makovsky most recently defeated Tim Elliott earlier this month in Broomfield, Colorado. And it is official that the UFC will return to Mexico City on Saturday, June 13th for the UFC 188 pay-per-view card, and are bringing a big main event for their return. Heavyweight champion Cain Velasquez will step into the octagon after close to 19 months when he defends against interim title holder Fabricio Verdum. Velasquez last fought at UFC 166, defeating Junior Dos Santos in their 3rd bout. Verdum became the interim champion after defeating Mark Hunt last November in Mexico City. This coming Saturday night, we're getting you all set for Ronda Rousey and Kat Zingano with our live preview show at 7 Eastern with Robin Black, John Ramdeen, and myself, leading into the prelims on TSN2 at 8 p.m. Eastern with 4 fights to get you set for the pay-per-view card, which happens at 10 Eastern, headlined by women's bantamweight champion Ronda Rousey defending against the undefeated Kat Zingano. Ladies and gentlemen, our red and blue corner, John Ramdeen and Robin Black with us. Breaking down the action from a Sunday night UFC card. My goodness, these Sunday night cards. I'm a big fan of Saturday night. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Antonio Bigfoot Silva, Frank Mir, they had most of the focus going into this show. Frank Mir really turning back the clock. I think he looked like a rejuvenated Frank Mir. First win since 2011. 2 very diametrically opposed performances, I think.
Yeah, what this does for Frank Mir, it kind of re-injects him into the heavyweight picture. I don't think people are going to say, oh, you know, this guy should be facing off with Fabricio Verdum or Cain Velasquez for the title.
Maniacs,
I'm sure some will, but if you look at matchups, you know, this is what mixed martial arts is all about. It really doesn't matter wins and losses. It's the type of performance. And even Mir going into this fight says, you know, people are talking about what happens if I lose 5 fights in a row. I'm looking at what type of performance I have. If I come out and I feel awesome.
That's way more indicative today. It's the quality of performance as opposed to...
Even if Frank Mir lost, for example, but he looked fresh, he looked good, you still can take something away from that. But the fact is...
guy with 4 straight losses really salvaged this card. Take that main event off. This card is looking pretty dire in Brazil when you lose a main event. Frank Mir, it's like those 4 losses were not part of the discussion when they said, hey, we need a main event.
That's right.
When I look at Frank Mir, yes, you look at, you know, coming out righty. So land in the 1-3, that was all nice, but I look at everything we learned about Frank Mir in the last couple weeks. Frank Mir is an analytical 35-year-old. Frank Mir is not going, how do I compete at 35? How do I do this? How do I do A, B, and C? Frank Mir is analyzing data. Frank Mir is looking at it going, how do I get better as a fighter? I got to go back to right-handed. I got to train this. I have to improve my performance. I have to look at how I perform. Everything Frank Mir is doing is scientific. Frank Mir is a highly intelligent guy. We've always talked about how good his submissions are, how good his skills are, but it's his mind that is his real strength. And if Frank Mir is going to make a run, it's because of how smart he is right now.
We can rebuild him. We have the technology. Antonio Silva, though, another question. This was another tough performance to watch for Antonio Silva, much like the Andre Orlovsky fight. You look at this guy, listen, I feel for this man. There's a lot of people we have seen who were given TRT exemptions that realistically we can see Frank Mir off TRT looked a lot better than Frank Mir on TRT. Antonio Silva is one of those cases where if this guy were in any other profession, this man would be on this for his own health and safety. I don't know if fighting is necessarily the occupation he should be pursuing at this point in his life. It was very difficult to watch him, slow, not the kind of movement we've seen in the past, and just dropped from that left hook.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate thing because I think there should be exemptions in mixed martial arts. I think Bigfoot Silva is one of those cases, and I think that the commission should take a long look at, okay, who are the guys that are in real need of this? And I think there'll be guys and girls in mixed martial arts that would probably need it for one reason or another. But I think for Bigfoot Silva, as you pointed out, yeah, well, how is he going to make money? Sure, he can leave mixed martial arts and go do something else, but this is the way that he can earn the most amount of money for his family. I'm sure he'll open his own gym just like Lyoto Machida did, and because of that, be successful and have some residual income. But you hope that everybody has kind of planned their chess pieces out, because there is going to be a day when you're not competing at the highest level.
Hey, if you guys watch this show very much, you know that I'll be like, let's not talk about steroids, let's talk about fighting. Well, there was a great heavyweight fight last night, but you guys want to talk about steroids for a second? Because if we're going to discuss performance-enhancing drugs, if we're going to discuss all of these things, if Bigfoot Silva was a lunch lady or an architect,
that's a hell of a visual.
He'd be a pretty good-looking lunch lady with that hat. But an architect, whatever he was, he would currently be on a whole bunch of hormones to correct himself. Now, art imitates life, imitates art, imitates life. But at one point, a lot of athletes took drugs. So what happened? You saw that they performed better. So now, regular people, everybody in Hollywood, I watched a bit of the Oscars with my in-laws last night. Everybody's on human growth hormone in the Oscars. But this man can't do it despite the fact that he actually needs it. He could if he was a lunch lady, but he can't as a fighter. What does that mean?
Let's quickly touch on one other performance, and that was Michael Johnson, who I thought had the best performance of anyone on this card, looking so dynamic with his striking. And what was interesting was Michael Carroll, who does a great breakdown of stats, was analyzing, he really only landed about 20% of his shots, but his volume was just so much greater. This guy looked like a completely different fighter than we had seen the last performance from Michael Johnson, overwhelming Edson Barboza.
And that's it. And at the same time, it's not really the Edson Barboza that we're used to seeing. Yeah, we saw in the Bobby Green fight, he let Green move forward, but I think for Edson Barboza, he's got to use his physical attributes. He has to use his power, and I think he let that fight slip away because Michael Johnson was able to use the forward pressure, and I think if Barboza flipped the script and he moved forward, I think it would have been a different outcome.
Go to sportscliches.com. There's 1 billion of them, and somewhere around 1,000, you're going to see the best defense is a good offense. That's what Michael Johnson did.
Adriano Martins and Rustam Khabilov also happened. Holy Christ.
Also
We're not talking about that one. More Fight News Now Extras coming up.